All right, good morning. Now that we have a quorum, I will call our March meeting of Central Oklahoma Transportation and Parking Authority to order. We've got several items from the chairman. One is a presentation by Eugene Fritz on the American Institute of Architects Award of Excellence Program presents the honor award for large commercial architecture.
Anthony, do you want to
Oh,
come up?
Anthony.
I think Anthony's going to.
Anthony's going to, okay. All right. Yeah, well, we know him.
Yeah, I was going to say, we know a familiar face.
Well, I turned it around so when we make some other presentations, we could,
Well, thank you. I don't think I need this. Mr. Chairman, trustees, it is my profound pleasure to bring this award to the Board of Trustees. We started this project more than 2 years ago, and we were charged with designing a good-looking garage. So sexy actually was the word used. But we're delighted to have received this award, but more than that, I'd like to say that working with COTPA has been a pleasure. This is not our first time with the board, but it has been a pleasure. It is great to work for owners that expect a high level of performance, and so in our experience with COTPA, that has always been a mandate, is that we produce a really, really good product. So without that kind of, without that mandate, we can't do what we do. So you should congratulate yourselves on expecting excellence, and we're delivering, we hope. So this is hopefully the first of many awards. This is the top design award from the American Institute of Architects for the state of Oklahoma. We know it's already won other awards from the general contractors, and then we're also submitting it for an award to the International Parking. Thank you. It's changed. Now it's called the International Mobility Institute. Thanks, Corey. So anyway, hopefully there'll be more of these awards to come. So thank you. I'm going to just deliver this to Corey.
okay. Why don't we go ahead and do the safety presentation real quick before we get to our other presentations.
You need to turn it around. I come up.
No. Now you,
There we go.
well, there's a handle underneath to turn it. There you go.
Brute force. All righty.
That's the kind of teamwork we have every day.
Morning, everybody. We ready for some exciting news? So Embark is now a third-party examiner for Department of Public Safety. So Dino here is our examiner. So what does this mean? So we can now do CDL testing at 2000 and South May Avenue. So this is important because DPS has been backlogged at times. So we would have employees ready to do testing, and we would have to wait. Their schedule would be like 2 weeks or 3 weeks out, and they would just be practicing for 2 or 3 weeks. So we now have a little bit more control over when we do the test. We'll be able to do that at right there at South May Avenue for our employees. So that also gets the employees out into operations a lot quicker as well. So we're saving money where they're not just practicing for a test. They could test sooner, and we get them back out into operations a lot sooner as well. So CDL, the Class B, this is what our employees, the license our employees get. So Class B definition is a gross vehicle weight over 26,001 pounds or more. So our employees also need a passenger endorsement, and they also need air brakes. So obviously, those are two of our buses. Another equipment, more familiar that you might have seen is a straight box truck up there. So they also need a Class B. So the Class A, so Dino actually has a Class A CDL license, but he has a manual brake restriction. So he can only test Class A that have automatic transmission. So once he gets the manual transmission restriction lifted, he'll then be able to, so these are two vehicles. One is from airports, one is from utilities. So once he gets that, then he'll be able to do testing for these types of vehicles for the other departments. And so CDLA is 26,000 pounds or more with trailers that have 10,000 pounds or 10,001 pounds or more. So that's typical CDL tractor trailer that you typically see would be a Class A. So this is Dino with Chris McGurdy, our first employee to pass a test at South May Avenue. And that is my presentation. Anybody have any questions?
No? All right, thank you.
All righty, thank you.
I'm going to come down front. Well, it's a real privilege today, and before I talk about Kay a minute, I've always said that I think the COPTA Trust, and I'm not familiar with every trust in Oklahoma City and all the trustees, but the COPTA Trust through the years have had the most engaged trustees that care about their job and have done everything they can to make public transit and the parking garages as successful as they've been. And Kay, you and I and Barney we're about the old heads now, but you had to retire on us. So, but I wanted to say that Judy and I enjoyed all our trips together, and she always enjoyed visiting with you because you all had a kind of a personal relationship before all this. So anyway, but we've got a resolution. Let me read it to you. Whereas the Board of Trustees of Central Oklahoma Transportation and Parking Authority, in recognition and profound appreciation of the distinguished service of Kay Bickham. Kay served as a trustee for COPTA from 1991 to 2020 and has provided outstanding guidance to the board and residents of Central Oklahoma and Edmond, Oklahoma. I think that I need to throw that in. Kay committed personal time to learning about and advocating for the advancement of public transportation in Central Oklahoma, engaging with transit experts from around the country through involvement with the American Public Transit Association. Kay served on the COPTA board marketing committee, and during her time as chairperson, unprecedented awareness of public transportation grew as a result of the award-winning marketing, public relations, and community engagement efforts. Kay also served on the COPTA Transportation Committee responsible for establishing the COPTA Long-Range Plan, Fixed Guideway, Transit Service Analysis, Regional Transit Dialogue, and the Northwest Bus Rapid Transit. Whereas her service led to service improvements, including doubling the frequency on all weekly routes, introducing weeknight service, launching the Oklahoma River Cruises, Spokey Bike Share, and Oklahoma City Streetcar, garnered national recognition in 2016, earning the prestigious North American Outstanding Public Transit Award. Kay also supported the growth of public transportation throughout the region, including public transit in the city of Edmond, and later COPTA as an operator of Norman Transit. Now therefore be it resolved by the trustees of COPTA that they do hereby recognize the public service and profound contributions of Kay Bickham. Okay. I put together a little plaque for you for 1991 to 2020. I thought that's kind of all our modes of transportation. So
That's great. Thank you. I'll hang that on my wall.
Okay, and here's the resolution, so.
Thank you.
Would you like to say a word or two?
Oh, gosh. I love public transit. I loved all the time that I worked with the trust, and, you know, I just kind of miss not knowing what's going on downtown now. Didn't even know how to get in the building. But thank you, Chris.
Well, we'll give you a star because you were 5 minutes early, and
I
usually you
know.
were right on time to the meeting, so.
Well, my driver makes
Oh,
me be
okay.
early.
So you're to be commended for getting here early.
Thank you.
All right,
Thank you.
thanks.
Thanks.
Judy told me to tell you hello.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
You don't come up here, too?
You got to get your driver in there, then get her here on time.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I would just like to add, in addition to the remarks that you read regarding Kay, our city is so blessed to have so many volunteers who serve boards and commissions across every type of discipline that we have. But Kay, for many years, you put the Central Oklahoma Transportation and Parking Authority, and we appreciate you so much for being a part of that. When you weren't even a resident of Oklahoma City, you brought service and dedication to our trust. We came a long way during the time that you were a trustee, and I appreciate your participation in that very much. Thank you.
May I? I'd like to add as well, you mentioned Edmond. This is strange, actually, in some ways. Every time I drive to teach at UCO, and what is the street, the little side street that you and I talk about through the neighborhood? Oh my God, I cannot believe I'm blank. Rankin. I can't believe of all days. But I take Rankin so I can avoid the main street, so it's more pleasant to get the neighborhoods. And when you told me that that's the area you call home, now every time I drive to go teach, I think of you and I think of your contributions to this trust. So I just want to echo what Laura said. So just thank you so much for what you've done. The people, you've improved their lived experience on a daily basis. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, our next item on the agenda is recognizing Jeannie Smith. Jeannie's here in the house. Come on up. How are you, Jeannie? Good morning. Good morning. Well, we have a resolution of recognition and appreciation for you this morning, and it'd be my honor to be able to read that and share that with the audience and the board. You ready?
Go.
All right. Whereas the Board of Trustees of the Central Oklahoma Transportation and Parking Authority, in recognition and profound appreciation of the distinguished service by Jeannie Smith, and whereas Jeannie Smith started working at the city in 2005 and came to the Central Oklahoma Transportation and Parking Authority in 2007, where she managed the Oklahoma River Cruises. And whereas Jeannie Smith cultivated many relationships with other civic organizations throughout the city, such as the Oklahoma History Center, the Greater Oklahoma City Chamber, Oklahoma City Riverfront Redevelopment Authority, and whereas Jeannie Smith represented the Central Oklahoma Transportation and Parking Authority as a member of the Operator Advisory Group, and whereas Jeannie Smith was also a founding member of the Oklahoma chapter of the Women's Transportation Seminar, WTS International, from 2016 through 2019. And whereas in 2014, she assumed management of the Spokies Bike Share Program, where she converted Spokies equipment and the management of software to B-Cycle. And whereas Jeannie Smith was an integral part of developing multimodal transit options in central Oklahoma. Now therefore be it resolved by the trustees of the Central Oklahoma Transportation and Parking Authority that they do hereby recognize the service and the profound contributions of Jeannie Smith, adopted today, the 4th of March, 2022. So congratulations, Jeannie. So, I think we could have had 2-page resolutions for both Trustee Bickham and Jeannie. What the resolution didn't mention was Jeannie was also part-time parking manager for a while, just the go-to person for anything that we needed, and you just were always stepping up and making sure things got done. And so we just appreciate you.
Thank you.
You want to say a few words or anything? The mic is yours if you want it.
Well, I would just say I got my first job when I was 13, and I think I've worked every year of my life since then. But the 14 years I've worked for the city and COTPA have been the most challenging and the most fun that I've ever had in any of my jobs. And thank you all for all your support. Hornblower Marine Services, bike transit system where Josh is from, some of the best operators a person could have to help work with. And I appreciate you all. Thank you.
Here's your resolution. And Jeannie's already received her plaque, so.
Yeah.
All right.
And I tried to get the trust to give you a bicycle for your retirement, but they wouldn't do that, so.
Jeannie, Mr. Chairman, I would like to just add, I appreciate so much how much dedication you put into always finding solutions for things that would crop up all the time. That during especially the turmoil that we had regarding the pandemic and all of that, you're coming up with solutions and developing those is really appreciated. Little known fact, Jeannie and I went to college together. Didn't know that until after she'd come to the city of Oklahoma City, but many years ago at the University of Dayton. So congratulations on your recognition today, Jeannie.
And then may I add, I'm very tired, so I could be wrong, but didn't you and I serve together on an RFP for the bike share program back in like 2015 when I first started on COTPA? I was so scared being on that process. I was like, I'm gonna mess this up. I remember laying in bed, reading through all the different proposals, like, oh no, this I don't think. And then finally I was like, oh yeah, that's why they taught me critical thinking skills. I have to like apply them now. And I just remember then getting on, I don't know, some meeting with you, and just, you made that process so just like a glove. And I remember that, and thank you. And I'm sure you've made a lot of other happy moments for folk along your time here, so thank you.
James, I hate to say this, but you've come a long way from being scared to death.
Scared to death, to super tired, and almost 40.
Okay. All right, we need a motion to receive the resolutions for both parties. So do we vote on them individually, or?
I think we should.
Okay, then a resolution for distinguished service by Kay Bickham. All right. See, we told Kay, we told you before, everything's computerized now, so we're having to learn on the fly. So, all right, and then the resolution for Jeannie. Have a motion and second. All right, motion passes. Thank you. All right, do we have any residents to be heard this morning? I was not advised of any, so. Our next item is our minutes from our February meeting. The trustees, any changes, additions, or questions? If not, I'd have a motion to approve our minutes. All right, motion passes. All right, our consent docket, we've got several items on there. Any of the trustees like to have special discussion on it, or Jason, do you have any discussion on any of the consent docket?
No, sir.
All right, then I'd hear a motion to approve our consent docket. Motion passes. All right, our items for individual consideration, the final comprehensive operational analysis report. Who's going to do?
Yep.
Oh,
I
okay.
can
Okay,
talk
you're-
about that. So, yeah. So, item A here on our individual items for consideration is a big step forward in continuing to enhance the status and use of transit in the Central Oklahoma region. You guys have, as the trustees, have been very involved in our comprehensive operational analysis. We've had multiple workshops. As you're aware, that project started back in January of 2021 when the board authorized staff to issue an RFP and begin the whole selection process for a consultant to help us examine and study our current fixed route bus system and make recommendations to keep that system relevant and to modernize it for really all the things that have changed within our city since the last transit system analysis was conducted back in the 2012-2013 time. And so there's a lot of information in your memo here that kind of summarizes some of the pieces of the overall comprehensive operational analysis. But the point today is that this is the final report. So our consultant is completed their recommendations, staff has completed their evaluation. We've met with trustees either individually or through workshop settings. And so the action that we're asking the trust to take today is simply to receive this final report and recommendations. And I wanted to really make a point of clarity there because the trust is being asked to receive the report. The trust is not being asked to make any changes at this time. And part of the reason for that is because the recommendations that are outlined in this final report are sequenced. So we have some recommendations that we've categorized as short-term. We have some recommendations that are considered as long-term. Some of the short-term recommendations are cost-neutral. All of the long-term recommendations will require additional resources. But nearly all of the recommendations hinge on integrating with the BRT. So as we work towards getting the BRT ready for launch, there'll be a series of short-term recommendations we'll bring to the trust approximately a year from now, probably the November, December timeframe. And then once the BRT is launched and in service, there'll be another set of recommendations. And so that's what will really kick off the majority of the community engagement process for individual route changes. Up to this point, we've had a lot of public engagement in terms of virtual workshops and interviews conducted at the transit center, but that's really been more about the system as a whole. So as we go to start making individual route changes in the future, that's when we'll have community meetings like we've done in the past. Like I say, we'll cover individual route changes, and then of course the public process and public hearing to make any official changes. So huge milestone in the big picture of continuing to improve transit, particularly our fixed route bus system, but there will be more work and more consideration from the trustees as we get closer to particularly launching the BRT. I'm happy to answer any questions, and certainly before I forget, do want to mention all the work of staff that went into this report, and Chip Nolan's here with us today. He managed the majority of this project, but a lot of individuals were involved.
Jason, is the report in its long version going to be posted on a website someplace?
Yes, so yes, thank you, Trustee Sepner. We've included the executive report as part of your trust packet that you've received today. the executive summary report and the full report will be posted not only on our Embark OK website, but it will be part of the official meeting today. We just didn't print the entire report for your packet.
Any other questions? If not, I'd have a motion to approve item A. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor? Motion passes. Item B is a request for proposal for COPTA 22-002 Mobility Data Management, Customer Information and Trip Planning Software. Estimated annual cost of $175,000 and authorize the administrator to advertise.
So with approval of this item, the software that we hope to gain from issuing this RFP is really going to enhance and kind of take our trip planning software capabilities to the next level. We've been, rather stagnant, if you will, with our current technology in terms of trip planning. We haven't really upgraded that or looked at that for about the 2014-15 time period. So as you can imagine, a lot of things have changed. Now keep in mind, we have a plethora of tools available to riders for trip planning. But again, the software needs to be upgraded. And with approval of this item, what we'll do is we'll go out and seek from the marketplace really the newest technology in really allowing different systems to talk to one another. And so I'll try to explain this piece of it. But essentially right now, we have one system within Embark, and we provide that data to, let's say, app developers or companies like Google that integrate transit into their maps. This software, again, if approved by the trust and we're able to select a vendor in the future, this software will actually allow us to do a better job of managing not only all of our transit data that's within the Embark system, but we'll also be able to connect to, say, the Embark system in Norman, which is on basically a synchromatic system. If the city of Edmond would like to share data, we can basically pool all the data together. So from a customer experience, in particular, trip planning won't just be limited, for example, to Oklahoma City fixed route. They could potentially use this software or our portal or interface to plan transit throughout the region. And as with our involvement with the RTA, hopefully, ultimately, there'll be even other systems that can be integrated into it. So our estimated cost for this is $175,000. We'll fund it primarily through federal grants. And again, this item is really just allowing us to issue the RFP.
All right. Any questions? Then I'd have a motion to approve item B. It's been moved and seconded, and motion passes. All right, item C is a request for proposal for COPTA's, 2025 senior and mobility service providers for various grant-funded mobility programs, and authorize the administrator to advertise. Estimated annual cost $300,000.
Yes, sir. So another RFP for the trust consideration, which of course means we'll have some contracts hopefully to bring back to the trust in the future months. With this RFP, really what we're looking to do is to seek contracted transportation providers for our mobility management services. I know you guys are very familiar with those services. Marilyn Dillon manages that program and has given various reports. But you know, we do rely heavily on contracted service providers for our congregate meal site transportation, the shopping trips we do for seniors, our non-emergency medical trips that we manage for seniors, at the Embark Well program. And so with our existing number of providers, we are starting to have some capacity limitations. In other words, we need more contractors and vehicles to sometimes satisfy all the trip requests we have. So we're going back out to the market, seeking proposals
to try to basically get some more contractors that we can call to help manage our trip volume. So again, with that, if the RFP is approved today, we'll advertise and bring back a contract to the board in the future.
How many contractors do we have now doing it?
We have at least 2. Cinderide is one of our primary contractors. We use Community Action Center. They're a great partner of us, been doing and helping us out with that for a long time. We've had various agreements off and on throughout the years with different cab companies. New Yellow Cab, I believe we might have had one with Thunder Cab at one time. So some of those, are changing, and that's why we need to go back out to the market and try to get a few more of those contractors available to use.
All right. Any questions by any of the trustees? If not, I'd have a motion to approve. All in favor? Motion passes. All right, item D is resolution to approve Title VI program for fiscal year 2022-25, and I guess, did you say Chip's going to make a presentation?
Yes, sir. Chip Nolan will provide a brief summary of the Title VI program, and as he gets ready there, this is part of our compliance with the FTA as a recipient of federal funds. It's necessary and good for us from a business standpoint to have a Title VI program in place, and we submit that to the FTA for review and approval every 3 years. And so in an effort to keep the trustees informed, Chip's going to share a few words about our Title VI program.
Good morning.
Morning.
My name is Chip Nolan. I'm a planner with Embark, and I'll talk about Title VI today. So I'll talk about what it is, what we're doing, and what we're asking you to do. This comes from the Civil Rights Act of 1964. It says specifically that we will not discriminate based on race, color, or national origin, is what the law says. Those protections were then extended to low-income populations through an executive order in 1994. This practically on a day-to-day basis, this comes to us in the form of what's called a circular. It just means that the Federal Transit Administration they write a long document. It's an administrative guidance that tells transit agencies on a day-to-day basis, here's specifically what you need to do to fulfill the requirements of Title VI. So a lot of what I'll be talking about today are items in the circular that we have to do as part of this program. So it's just a reporting tool. It's just a report that we submit to them. We submit it every 3 years. Some of the things that we turn in are the same every time, but we also talk about what's changed since the last time we submitted the report. We talk about service changes, fare changes, if there were any, do we build any new buildings, and then what types of analysis went into those changes. One of the sections is called General Requirements. This applies to any transit agency regardless of their size. So this applies to big and small transit agencies. So you have to notify your customers of their rights under Title VI. So we have notices on all of our transit vehicles. With this notice, it's also posted at the transit center. It tells people how to file a complaint under Title VI and what the process looks like and how to contact us. We also translate that into the predominant languages of the service area. We use several data points to determine this. A lot of it comes from census data, but we also look at the types of phone calls that we're receiving, what languages our websites translated into. So Spanish is the predominant language, but Vietnamese and Chinese also meet that threshold. So we do some translation into those languages, but predominantly it's Spanish. And we do have to outline the efforts to provide materials in other languages, and that's called LEP, or Limited English Proficiency. There's an LEP plan within the Title VI program that we follow. And that includes training for customer service representatives and operators. These requirements are specifically for transit agencies that have more than 50 buses in peak service. So these are a little more burdensome, and so they only apply to larger transit agencies, which we fall into, but Edmond and Norman don't have to follow these. So they want to see some data. They want to look at some metrics to see how you're doing and to make sure that those performance metrics are consistent throughout the service area. They don't want to see one part of your service area performing better or worse than the other parts, because that may result in a Title VI issue. We also report the demographics of our service area to the FTA. We look at census data, but we also look at service. We also look at our survey. We do a writer survey every year. A lot of that is about customer service, how are we doing and how can we do better, but we also collect some demographic information that's really valuable. And we can break that out by route to help us learn a little bit more about the character of each route, and you can see some of that data here. So again, this applies to larger transit agencies, which we are, and we have to look at the impact of these service changes. And so we categorize them as major service changes. So that's just a threshold. When you have a major service change, certain things have to happen according to the FTA. You have to have a public hearing, you have to have board approval, and you have to look at the impact to your customers in the service area. And so this is how we define a major service change. If you have a new route, if you're taking away a route, if you're significantly changing an existing route, that would be qualified as a major service change. Now, we go through these similar steps for any service change of any size, but the FTA requires you to define a major service change, to follow specific steps, and then to document that for them later on. But we follow similar process for any service change. So when you look at the impact of service changes, they're referred to as disparate impacts and disproportionate burdens. It just means that is there going to be a significant impact to anyone as a result of this service change? And so when we look at that, we look at the population living along the route or the survey data of the people using the route. We look at both data sets, and you're looking at how many people might lose service as a result of that service change. And so that's what you're looking at. So anytime we do a service change, we go through this process to make sure that we are aware of any impacts that might happen to our customers and our residents. So if you have a service change, you go through a service equity analysis or a fair equity analysis, and it looks like there may be a disproportionate impact or a disparate burden, you have to try to mitigate that as much as possible. You have to document, hey, there's a really, really good reason why we're doing this, or we're going to scrap this service change altogether and we won't do it as a result of the service equity analysis. And then anytime you go through a major service change, that is shared with the board. So during this 3-year period that this report covers, we went through 2 service changes, even though there's 3 listed there. We no longer provide the Route 50 because it had a really low ridership. It was a poor performing route. We used those resources to increase frequency on Route 9, which has responded really well to that improved frequency. We also increased frequency on Route 18. We did not have any fair equity analysis, and there was no disproportionate burdens or disparate impacts as a result of these changes. You also have to do similar analysis for new facilities, but we did not do any during this time period. So what we're asking you today is to approve a resolution to approve our Title VI program, and we'll submit it for review to the Federal Transit Administration on April 1st. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
And then this is good through 2025?
Correct.
So you don't have to go through this
Right.
again? All right, any questions of Chip?
It's not a question so much just a comment and to commend you. I mean, this seems like very very detailed work you're probably having to do, and that each time staff has to engage. But it's just been really heavy on my mind the last several weeks. Transit is part of a civil rights struggle, whether it was the Montgomery boycotts or, literally, if people were to Google this man who I wish wasn't part of history, but he is Lee Atwater, and if you Googled his name in Southern Strategy, he literally gave politicians language to start defunding access to public transit as a result. They were so mad, they were so racist and mad about Montgomery's bus boycott being successful that 1 year worth of boycott and walking to work Martin Luther King going to Montgomery. They called him an outside agitator because he wasn't from there. He's from Atlanta, as you remember. And they were successful, and as a result, people who were racist, rather than let black and white people and every person of color sit together on a bus, they literally started a strategy to defund access to public transit, and they started this whole campaign to make it seem like it was scary to be on transit, that it was gonna be scary to sit next to a black person, for instance. And city after city just started cutting public transit. So I mean, and then that's why a 1964 Civil Rights Act has to come into effect, is what I'm saying. Like, there's a real reason for it, and it's just always on my mind. And so I'm really thankful that you took time this morning to walk us through the painstaking work that we do as a city to make sure that we're serving our most vulnerable, because we have to remember there are always people in every community globally who try and hurt the most vulnerable. They will even try and hurt the most vulnerable and end up hurting everyone else, right? Just to hurt the most vulnerable. And that's the opposite of the work we do. And I'm just proud of that, so thank you.
You're welcome, happy to help.
All right. Do I have a motion to approve item D? It's been moved and seconded. All in favor? Motion passes.
I did not get a voting button yet. I'm sorry, yes, I do want to vote yes.
All right, motion passes. Good. Item E is a resolution approving changes in the Spokie's bike share fee schedule effective March 7th, 2022. Corey?
Good morning.
Morning.
As you're aware, the trust approved the purchase of 52 electric bikes recently. With that purchase, we'll be updating all of our current fleet to make them smart bikes. So we'll be stepping away from the 8 bike stations and enhancing that to approximately 140 current bike racks within our service area. So we're excited about that. With that comes new rates for the electric bikes. We currently charge 12 cents per minute for the pedal-powered bikes. We're proposing 15 cents per minute for the electric bikes. Our proposed new fee schedule eliminates some costs that some hardware costs that will go away should a customer have lost an item. The addition of lost bike fee for our new electric bikes of $2,500. Our monthly rates, one, we changed it from monthly to 30-day pass. We've increased the cost from $5 to $20. At the same time, we increased the number of minutes that person can ride the bicycle per day from 15 to 40 minutes. Very similar to our annual pass. That jumped up from $50 to $120 is our recommendation. Again, expanding the 15 minutes per day to 40 minutes per day. During our review of the rates, regionally, we looked at Tulsa, Colorado Springs, and Kansas City for comparable rates and fee structures, along with drops, other cities in Dayton, Ohio, and New Orleans. May I answer any questions?
Do you have those city comparisons for us? I'd love those.
Not handy, not with me right now, no. But I can get that to you.
Thank you. That would be helpful, because I haven't seen those comparisons.
All right, any questions of Corey? All right, thank you. Do I hear a motion to approve item E? It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you. Item,
Do I need to do something, Dina?
rebooted. Item F is a joint resolution with the RTA of Central Oklahoma agreeing to renew the Memorandum of Understanding for Interim Administrative Services, annual revenue $27,360, retroactive to February 1st, 2022 through January 31st, 2023.
Yeah, so as the trust is aware, we have an agreement with the RTA, or Regional Transportation Authority of Central Oklahoma, where Embark COTPA staff, basically provide the administrative functions that particular entity requires. And we entered into an agreement back in January of 2020. That was a 2-year agreement with a 1-year renewal. So it expired, of course, the first of this calendar year. The RTA did not have meetings in December or January, so that's part of why we're bringing this to you now after it expired. But we'll make it retroactive with approval today. We'll make it retroactive. The revenue that you see there of $27,360, when we entered into this agreement with the Regional Transportation Authority of Central Oklahoma, we recognized there'd be some additional staffing needs to support, another trust essentially. And so we added a position to the budget. That position is funded primarily through some grant revenue. But the local match, if you will, or the local contribution comes directly from the RTA, and that is where that revenue amount comes from.
You might refresh our memory and just what administrative services we're really providing.
Yeah, thanks for asking that. So, the RTA is an entity right now that is comprised of member cities, which means there's only a board of directors, so really no staff at all. So our primary function is paying the bills, the few claims that the RTA has, working with the accounting department to prepare the financial statements. So the city's accounting department helps us with that. We generally organize and present that information to the RTA. And then really the heaviest lift is managing the meetings, the monthly meetings that the RTA has. We put together an agenda and manage that meeting just like staff does the COTPA agenda. But then the RTA is also involved in outreach committee meetings where we're actively engaged in meeting with stakeholders and member cities once a month. We have a property acquisition committee meeting occasionally. So there's a lot of calendar management, excuse me, and preparing agendas for meetings.
There's been some articles on the news and the paper about the rail system. Is that really going to be managed kind of by the RTA or?
Well, there's been a couple of items talked about with regards to rail through our capital city here, Oklahoma City. One of them is you've probably seen some articles or some information about Amtrak service, the Heartland Flyer.
Yeah, but this really wasn't about the Amtrak.
And so if it wasn't about Amtrak, then it was probably about the Regional Transit Authority's efforts to establish a commuter rail corridor from Edmond to Norman. And I believe there was an article in the paper maybe it was Friday or Saturday, but within a week, I believe the Oklahoman covered kind of a general update on the RTA, and then also discussed, some changes with the board composition with Midwest City electing, actually to pull out of the RTA, but, continue to support the RTA and transit, just pull out of the RTA.
But they're going to continue to support it.
Yeah, at least, our conversations with Midwest City have been very productive. It's just I would just categorize it as their priorities have changed. Going into the RTA as a founding city, all cities have the opportunity to join, and if it's going to work for their community, great. If it's not, they can withdraw. In this particular instance, Midwest City again, determined they would withdraw officially from the RTA. But yeah, as far as supporting transit, I mean, they've been great partners to COTPA and Embark. You know, we operate the Midwest City Route 15, and we have for years and years. In fact, we've talked even with Midwest City about some of the recommendations and the comprehensive operational analysis to improve bus service over there. So they continue to be a supporter of transit for sure, and also regional transit.
All right, any questions? Then I hear a motion to approve item F. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you. Our last item on individual consideration is a contract with the Associated of Central Oklahoma Governments for 5303 funding for transit planning, estimated revenue in the amount of $152,000, retroactive to July of 2021 to June of 2022.
Yes, this is a good this is a good opportunity to recognize our great partnership and working relationship with ACOG. As you know, they wear a lot of hats, they have a lot of responsibilities, but one of the things they spend a lot of time on is transportation planning for the region. And they're a solid supporter and always have been of transit. And this is actually a new agreement that we have with ACOG for some funds that they receive as the MPO for the region. And so by entering into this agreement with ACOG, they're able to pass on, as your memo indicates, about $152,000 of planning funds that come to the region that we can then use specifically for transit planning. And so with approval of this item, we'll be able to move forward with leveraging these funds for future planning efforts.
All right, any questions? Then I hear a motion to approve item G. It's been moved and seconded.
Yes.
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 Motion passes. All right, our next item is ratification of claims and payroll from February 1st through February 23rd. Any questions by any of the trustees on any of those vendor claims or payroll? If not, I'll have a motion to ratify. It's been moved and seconded. Motion passes. All right, we're down to our financial reports, COPTA's schedule of revenue and expenditures, budget to actual for the month ended January 31st. Jason, any comments on any particular items on there?
Yeah, sure. I'd like to begin, if I could, by making a few comments about the transportation operations report on page 2. This is through 7 months of the fiscal year, so ending January 31st, 2022. As far as the revenue and expenditure categories go, there's really no significant changes from last month in terms of trends. Obviously, some of the variances have changed. So I'll just speak briefly and direct the trust's attention to the revenue section first. Our federal grant revenue, you can see, is about 98% of what we had projected. We're about $85,000 less than, again, what we had projected to draw at this point in the year. You're going to see that variance we had when we looked at these reports last month, we actually were $243,000 under on what we had anticipated to draw. So although the trend is we continue to stay under our federal grant revenue, we have closed that gap, and that's primarily due to some payments of some additional supplies related to, basically operating in a pandemic environment and buying things such as masks and additional cleaners and those kinds of things. And then also, as you know, part of our federal grant revenue that we receive is for capital maintenance, which is some of the labor costs associated with maintaining our fleet, and labor costs have increased. So that's the explanation for the closing gap there. Our Fta Cares Reimbursement continues to be over what we had projected. And again, that was intentional in that we drew one of our maintenance reimbursements from our CARES funds rather than our federal grant funds, and I know I've explained that in the past as well. Looking at our expenditure categories, really the headline here in this section is our personal services. You can see at this point, through 7 months of the fiscal year, we're about $930,000 more in expenses than what we had anticipated. Keeping in mind, last month I mentioned we would need to address that through a budget amendment. We had intended on bringing that budget amendment to the trust in March, but due to some expenditure analysis we're looking at on the streetcar side of things that I'll get to in a minute, we decided to wait and try to bring that budget amendment to the trust in April. The primary driver of that personnel services being over budget is overtime and higher labor costs. And then finally, directing your attention to fuel, you can see we're about $26,000 over on our fuel budget. And just as a point of reference for the trustees, we are paying significantly more for fuel than what we were a year ago. So much so that last March we were at about $1.68 per gallon for diesel. I believe the last fuel bill we paid was around $2.84. So very large increase in fuel. With that said, our operating income continues to exceed our expenses through 7 months of the fiscal year by just under $1.2 million. All right, next page I'd like to direct your attention to would be page 4. These are our this is our parking operations budget to actual, again through January 31st. And again, as I mentioned in months past, monthly contract revenue is trending a little bit under budget, but transient and event revenue are significantly over. That additional revenue, coupled with expenditures being considerably under budget, have led to operating income where revenues have exceeded expenses through 7 months of the fiscal year by just under $1.5 million, and that's up from about $1.4 million when we looked at it last month. But I think the most striking thing on your report here is if you'll look at where we were last year, so the second column from the right, you can see our prior year revenue in excess of expenditures was around $103,000. So a dramatic difference, and primarily all because of transient and event revenue. If you'll remember, in the previous fiscal year, we really had no events, no event revenue at all. And so,
Yeah, at that point, even the Thunder wasn't allowing people to come into the games, so
Right.
I'm sure that's helping too.
yep. So we're making a really solid rebound on parking. And then finally, I'll finish my discussion here by pointing out some variances on our streetcar budget to actual, again, through 7 months, January 31st of 2022. Our revenues are pretty much in line with what we had projected. We're actually a little bit over. That's because we've drawn more general fund subsidy than what we had projected to draw through 7 months of the fiscal year. We've actually drawn $92,000 more than what we had estimated. And that's primarily because our expenses are, in some categories, are running over budget. I'll direct your attention primarily to streetcar operations, which through 7 months of the fiscal year, so this reflects all the invoices paid through December. We're at about $192,000 over on our general streetcar operations expenditures and about $336,000 over on supplies. And supplies really means parts, spare parts for the streetcar. So here's where I'll add another level of detail. There was some funding for spare parts in part of the MAPS 3 program. And in previous years, we've been able to leverage some of that MAPS 3 funding to offset the cost of those spare parts. We know that those funds are being used up. So we are working with Finance and the MAPS office now to determine if there is any funding available for spare parts in this current fiscal year. If so, then that would offset those extra expenditures. If not, we'll be including that in our budget amendment as well. With that said, through 7 months of the fiscal year, our operating revenue is essentially almost the same as our expenses, exceeding our expenses by about $35,000.
I'm curious.
Happy to answer any questions.
When you did the budget in the convention center parking garage, you had to build in numbers there. How accurate have you been on that? Any idea?
Not based on the information that's in the
I know,
packet, because we
I know.
roll it all
I
up.
was just curious. I
But,
mean,
it's worth noting, and let me go back to the parking operations, because one of the variances in the parking operations report that we've looked at is the tax-exempt parking. You'll notice that we're actually under budget on that revenue by about $234,000, and that's one we've mentioned in months past. It hasn't changed a lot, but nonetheless, it's been negative all year. And part of that is because we have not had the level of activity in the convention center garage, particularly from people staying at hotels, that we had projected in the budget.
because what I read, there's been quite a few conventions or quite a bit of activity at the convention center, so.
It's certainly picked up, from where it was at the start of the fiscal year.
All right.
Jason, do you, off the top of your head, I have the numbers here if you don't, but off the top of your head, do you happen to have what the increased ridership numbers have been for something like the streetcar? Do you know those numbers? Because I think it might make sense to speak to them at this moment of looking at the operations budget and the for streetcar and for the fixed route.
Yeah, the most current numbers are going to be in the transit system report. Overall, our ridership is up approximately 50% from what it was the previous year, if we're just going to generalize it. I remember in December, I think our passenger trips were, north of 40,000. Previous year, they were around 20,000. But overall, I think we're trending about 50% higher. Let me look at that report here.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to
If you have the,
I didn't mean to catch you off guard. It was just something I saw from the Oklahoma City Economic Roundtable where they had reached out to us. And
Yeah,
Oklahoma City streetcar, 48.8% increase. Mobility management, which we discussed during this meeting already, 60.56%. Embark Plus, 23.16% increase. Fixed route, weeknight service, 23.9%, and then fixed route, 18.46%. Those square about with your numbers?
Yeah, those are the numbers that we had provided to that group, and we appreciate that group asking about it, inquiring about transit ridership and that connection to the economy.
And I just wanted to connect it right here to the budget itself as why we do what we do with this budget, and just thank you all for making these numbers work so that people can get to work.
All right, any other questions on the financial?
Mr. Chairman, just one other thing I wanted to make note that we have the interim COTPA pension financial report included in your packet. That's only received really twice a year, so it's not one that you're used to seeing in your trust packet. If you have any questions, happy to discuss, but I would direct your attention to the management discussion and analysis portion of that report for a really good summary. Our net position, in other words, plan assets, is up over $2 million from the previous year. So the funding ratio continues to head in the right direction.
I can remember what the funding ratio was. compared to what it is today.
Yeah, absolutely. And I too recall that, and I recall the trust efforts and really priority and push to get that funding ratio up, actually, more or less giving staff and the committee a number to try to work towards. And so we've met that and exceeded it.
All right, if there's no other questions, I'd hear a motion to receive our financial reports, both A and B. Well, we have, there we go. Vote, all in favor, say aye, or vote aye. It's up there, but I guess motion passes. It doesn't show it on our screen here, so. All right. Our program reports, we're going to have a report on the BRT from Jesse.
Morning.
Morning.
Morning, Chairman, trustees. How's everyone doing? Everyone's enjoying this absolutely fantastic weather that we're having this week, right? Especially after last week's weather. I do want to take an opportunity real quick to give a public shout out to our operations and maintenance staff, especially talking about last week. Last week we had the pretty fun times with that ice storm. Our operations and maintenance staff just went, when you're faced with challenges, right, that's when leadership really stands up. And our operations and maintenance staff really did a fantastic job of last week, making sure that our fixed route, paratransit services, mobility services, streetcar, really were able to still maintain that service, because that's what we're all about, right? Making sure that we get people where they need to be and that they can depend on public transit. And so we were able to do that last week. We never missed any service at all across all of our modes of transportation. So I just want to take an opportunity to thank our operations and maintenance staff for really stepping up and providing that service. So I'm here today to talk about our RAPID, or our BRT system. Before we jump into that, I wanted to take a moment to also mention, this week we've been doing our coordinates meeting, which is our biannual meeting with employees. It allows an opportunity for Jason, Suzanne, and myself to give updates of what's going on kind of behind the scenes, right? So we're able to give roadmap updates. We're able to give updates on some of the projects that we're working on. So we were able to dig a little deeper into the BRT project that's coming online with our operations and maintenance staff and employees. It was really fun to see just how excited they were about the BRT, right? So just wanted to say thank you to the trustees and the board for allowing us to be able to bring that service to the residents of Oklahoma City. So thank you for that. All right, so let's talk BRT. Let's jump into it here. Nope, don't do that. Chip, can you run it for me? Thank you. All right, so let's talk schedule, right? So this is our milestone schedule. And we started back in October of 2020 with our kind of kickoff for the engineering. And where are we at today? So we are, you can click the next one there. So we are currently March of 2022. We're anticipating bringing the final plans and documents to the board for approval, and then finally taking that to City Council on March 29th so we can issue those out to bid and get started on our construction. So our milestone dates here, again, June of 2022, looking to issue that notice of receipt to our general contractor, then going through the construction process, and then kicking off revenue service fall of 2023. Any questions about the milestone schedule? All right, perfect. So let's talk bus procurements or bus construction. So this may look kind of familiar. This is kind of how we laid out the streetcar construction, kind of give a visual. So our first 6 buses have actually entered into line, so entered into construction. We receive weekly updates of where those buses are. We typically receive those Friday afternoons. We haven't received that update for buses 2223 through 2225, so I didn't want to give a visual misrepresentation, but we have received those updates for the first 3. So we are inching along with bus 2220 through 2222. Again, so our first 6 buses have entered into, or I'm sorry, yeah, first 7 buses have actually entered into construction. So the next couple of slides will show a few pictures of those first 3 buses and where they're at in those stages. So bus 2220, so it's going into the first stages of painting, right? So it's getting the masking done. They lay down that first coat of primer and like the backing, so like the colors around the windows and things like that, and around the frames, that gets laid down first, and then they start laying out everything else. So it's going through the masking process right now, and it'll enter into the paint booth next week. Our next bus is in the framing stages, and it's actually going through the underbody and beginning stages of wiring. So this is when they start laying in all that wiring. It's miles and miles of wiring, just like we saw with the streetcar, but nobody sees that because it's hidden behind all those interior panels. So kind of a cool picture of getting to see what that behind-the-scenes framing looks like. Then our next bus, 2222, is in the frame construction and the corrosion coating. So this is when you coat that entire underbody frame, so you don't have to worry about rust and things like that.
Not very
So
big
it's
wheels.
in the beginning stages of construction. And then the other buses are just a little bit behind that. Basically, they're in the jigs where they're starting to put the frames together. So this is Jesse's quickest presentation ever, so that completes the presentation. So if there are any questions, be happy to answer those now.
Go back to the timetable again,
Yep,
if you
you bet.
would.
Thanks, Chip.
So construction, you anticipate starting in June? I mean,
That's
is
right.
that what it-
Yeah. Yeah, so we'll take it to March 29th, City Council, and it'll turn around and get issued out to bid. We've got about 21 days built into the bid cycle. That's when the contractors can ask questions, and we issue any addendums that might happen. And then we'll be bringing that back to the board for issuing a notice to proceed to the contractor, and it gets final approval by
Have we
city.
resolved all our stops and any park and ride? Have we got all that resolved?
Yeah, so we're Jason, looked like you wanted to say something. No, okay, yeah, so yeah, we're working through that process. We'll actually be bringing an addendum to the board that will help us get the additional stop there at North Classen and Northwest 31st, increase the Black Welder stop to make it more of that connection point, and adding the sidewalks that we have talked about up at Northwest Expressway in Portland. So they won't be in the bid documents, but our engineer is aware of it, and we're working toward getting those wrapped up so that we can get it to the contractor to be able to receive the bid on it.
How about Northwest Expressway in Pennsylvania? There at Penn Square and in that area?
The park and ride location?
Well, and then the stop because of that new development.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, oh, are you talking about the shifting it for the Oak development?
yeah.
Yeah, so that's definitely in the bid documents. Yeah, we issued that back to the engineer several months back. That's all part of the bid documents, absolutely.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Because there was quite an article in the paper about that development, and nothing was said about the BRT in it.
Yeah, they are rocking and rolling on that development. We've been in close contact with the developer, constantly coordinating with them, coordinating with them and Public Works, because they've got a lot of underground utilities that they've got to work through also, so we're making sure there's no conflict. Yep.
Okay. All right, any questions of Jesse? All right, do we need to receive his report? We don't, you said, but we do need to
We'll need to receive
see
the reports that are on the agenda.
program reports on the agenda, even though we're not going to have a presentation.
Right.
So I'd have a motion to receive those program reports. Been moved and seconded.
Computer at the top.
All right. Motion passes. All right, thank you. All right, any items from any of the trustees they'd like to make mention of?
Not necessarily my own comments, but I'm wondering if, Jason, you might speak to, I think, a wonderful enhancement to service that the city is providing, but it was back in the consent docket, the agreement that we have with the Community Transportation Association of America. when it comes to foster care parent-child reunifications. I just think that's a wonderful service, and I thought it was in the consent docket, so we didn't get to discuss it. So I thought you might just make a mention of it, and then that's all I have.
Yeah, happy to talk about that real quick. And we do plan to provide a formal presentation on this as well. But you know, as the trust is aware, a couple of years ago, working with the OTA and the CTAA, we were able to be successful in award of a grant from the Arnall Foundation. And that grant was all about, you know, trying to support reunification of families that are in the state's foster care program. And one of the biggest challenges to families being able to complete the requirements and enter into reunification is transportation, right? There may be various classes and counseling and visitation and things like that that have to occur. But if the participants in the program don't have transportation, it makes it, you know, almost impossible to go through those required steps. And so we've been just really happy to partner with those entities that have been mentioned and provide that transportation. And we've really seen some positive results out of that. In fact, for those participants that we're assisting with transportation needs, you know, we can't at this point assist everyone, but the ones that we're able to assist, the reunification rate is above 60%. I believe it's around 63% is what Marilyn had shared with me. Marilyn Dillon and her staff manage that program and do a wonderful job. And we're actually in discussions right now with DHS to potentially take that program to the state and really us be that transportation provider, even for the state as they try to continue to reunify those families. So,
thank you.
All right. Any other question or comments by the trustees?
well,
Jason?
Mr. Chairman, if I still have the floor, just a couple of reminders, please. One is I wanted to just remind the trustees of our special COTPA meeting on March the 23rd. You should have received some emails and invitations from staff on that. That's our board workshop. And so it's going to be an interactive day, but primarily the objective there is to hear from the trust. Where is the future for the trust? Where do you want staff to concentrate efforts on? Basically developing a set of board initiatives. So providing us with guidance on the direction we need to go and the areas we need to emphasize in the coming years. And then the other comment I had is Jesse talked about the timeline for the bus rapid transit. And in order for us to make that timeline that he presented, we will need to approve the final plans and issue a bid in March or very first part of April. And of course that has to go to council too. So I've discussed with the chairman and the city manager's office about the potential of having a special meeting just to approve those final plans. And so we'll be looking to get that scheduled very quickly.
I might also ask about our workshop, and I know each trustee received a questionnaire, what their priorities were. Do we know if everybody's responded to that?
Yeah, I believe we have maybe one that hadn't responded, but nonetheless, we received a lot of great feedback, lots of ideas. In fact, we had a call with the facilitator that's going to help us with that workshop and went through, a page or more of items that the trustees had brought up as things already at the top of your mind that we need to discuss and vet a little further in the context of developing overall priorities. So we really thank you all for answering that survey.
I'll bet there was a lot of common theme throughout it for several items, so.
Yeah, you're right, there was definitely some common themes, which is a good thing for us in facilitating those priorities.
All right. If nothing else, then our meeting is adjourned. Thank everybody for attending.